What's up, everybody? Ricky Whitmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are here. You might be asking, guys, this ain't the Primetime Podcast. What are you guys doing? We have a special podcast segment for you guys. If you're on YouTube, hello. You guys can see our wonderful faces, Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, and Stitcher. You guys can not hear us because this is not a part of any of the podcasts that we have. So you're seeing our faces on YouTube, but the reason why we're doing this, we're talking a little baseball today, and we have a special guest to introduce. We have Patrick Hill calling in, one of our lovely patrons who support us on Patreon. First off, thank you, Patrick, for supporting us at the $10 tier. How are you doing on this wonderful Monday evening?
Oh, I'm great, Ricky. I'm great. I'm a little tired. It was a long day, but I am great.
Well,
awesome.
And we're going to be talking about some baseball. We're going to be looking at two big managers that have been hired, one team that's still looking for a manager. And I want to dive right into this, Patrick, because this is the stuff that you said you wanted to talk about. Let's start with the Nationals. I'm glad you picked this team first because, I love that Dusty Baker got fired. Like, after that series, I'm like, please fire this man. Does not deserve to be the manager of the Washington Nationals. They hire, it's sad for me to see him go, as he was our bench coach in Dave Martinez for the Chicago Cubs, but I'm sure he's going to do great things for the Nationals. I will start by asking you this. What are your thoughts with the Nationals hiring Dave Martinez to replace Dusty Baker?
You know, I was actually shocked that Dusty got fired because I knew how much their GM, Mike Rizzo, wanted him to stay, but I guess ownership kind of overturned that. And as much as I have like a semblance for Dusty because I loved him growing up, he kind of ended with the Cubs badly, but I did feel like it was kind of his time to go. And if they had to pick anybody to hire, Dave Martinez is probably the best fit that they probably could have gotten. A guy who's really young, a guy who's really good at communicating with players, a guy who is going to really focus on the analytical side, which Dusty really wasn't a big fan of. So I do like this deal a lot for the Nationals. And I especially like the fact that they actually gave him a 3-year deal when their last three managers, Dusty, Matt Williams, and Dave Johnson, only got 2-year deals. So that kind of shows that they have a lot of faith in Davey.
Well, I know. I think with Dusty Baker, you know, his time kind of ran out, as it does everywhere he goes, because he doesn't end up doing anything once he gets to the playoffs. And I think that was one of his big things here with Washington, with a roster full of talent on the pitching side and on the hitting side, and he couldn't do anything with that once it got to the time when it really mattered. So I think that that's one of the big reasons why he needed to go. But I think with Dave Martinez, an interesting thing with him, and I don't want to be that guy, but I think I'm going to try and be that guy right now. Going to kind of compare just a little bit with how the White Sox did it when they went and they got their man that they have right now in Rick Renteria, and he seems to be the same type of guy in terms of a man who is a great communicator with the players.
Also a former Cub manager.
Exactly. He gets the players like him, they respect him, and the White Sox at this point right now, the wins are not there, obviously, but they're coming. They're with a really good core group of guys, and they're coming. He's a good manager, I think. So I think that a move like this with Dave Martinez, another guy coming out of the Cubs organization, is a solid move by the Nats.
Oh, yeah. That's a great, solid move by the Nats. I would say the only thing that kind of holds me back about Dave Martinez is that the fact that he has never managed before. Like, I know he's the bench coach, so he probably has years of experience being the guy behind Joe Madden, which definitely probably helps a lot. But you do have to have that one thing where, you know, he has never managed before. The same with the guy the Red Sox just hired. But I do think he can definitely put it together. I think the only thing different that I would say about him and Rick Renteria is he inherits more of a veteran group of guys.
Yes.
And he also has to inherit the entire situation with, and I really hate to say that because he hasn't managed yet, but he has to inherit the Bryce Harper becoming a free agent at the end of next year. So he kind of has that coming over his head as he gets into next season.
Well, and I mean, my first thought, and you hit it right on the head, Patrick, was when people ask he's never really managed. I wonder if this is going to turn into a situation of like we see in the NBA where basically it's if you come from the Greg Popovich tree, you're fine. We want you as our head coach. We know you're going to do great, even if you were an assistant under Popovich in San Antonio. I wonder if we're kind of going to see the same thing with teams as we move forward. Basically, hey, if he's good enough for the Cubs and he's good enough for Theo Epstein to be on that coaching staff, that's a guy we're going to want in our kind of clubhouse, because obviously Madden is a Theo guy, and I believe Rick Renteria 2014 was also a Theo guy coming in and being on that squad for just that 1 year before Joe Madden came. But the thing that's really going to affect Martinez, I think, and you mentioned it right at the end, Patrick, the Bryce Harper thing. Do you think, and this is the last thing I'll ask you before we move on to Boston, since you mentioned Boston, was do you think that Dave Martinez is going to be able to do enough to keep Bryce in Washington and kind of keep him away from everyone else, mainly the Cubs?
You know what? I don't really know if you can pin that all on the manager to really keep him in there. I think the only thing that he can do to, like, for sure have a great shot at keeping Bryce Harper in Washington is he has to win the World Series. He has to get his team to that championship if they want to say without a doubt that, okay, we have a great shot of bringing back Bryce Harper. Because if they have another one-and-done exit, I don't think Bryce is going to consider really staying there.
Well, and now we'll move on. I want to ask you about the Red Sox. Just plain and simple, same thing I asked you to start the Nationals. Alex Cora, bench coach for the Astros. Now he's the manager in Boston. What were your reactions?
I think I was first shocked when I heard John Farrell got hired for a little bit, just because he's been out in the playoffs in the past 2 years. So I probably should have saw it coming. And also, Dave Dombrowski took over in Boston. I guess he would want his own manager to take over as the manager of his team. But I think with Alex Cora, he also comes from a similar tree, coming from Houston with a great manager down there. And plus, he's got the same traits, I feel like, that Dave Martinez has. He's got that communication down. He's got that analytical background down where he really embraces that. So I think out of everybody that they interviewed, and I've only heard reports about, they interviewed Brad Offsmith, they interviewed Ron Gardenhire. I think Alex Cora was definitely the best option for that team.
One of the things that I think is really interesting, especially, and maybe it's just because of this offseason and how it's gone with managers, but for the Red Sox, you've got Alex Cora. He was the Astros bench coach. For the Tigers, Ron Gardenhire, I know, has managed before. He was the Diamondbacks bench coach. The guy we just talked about, Dave Martinez, bench coach. We're seeing a lot more of these bench coaches being the guys hired instead of a pitching coach, or he was a former manager here or former manager there. I think that's just going to be really interesting to see how all of these, it's always interesting to see how they play out, but especially in terms of the bench coach and how they end up going. And also because of what you guys had mentioned earlier, not that I think that it's going to hold them back, but, they've never managed before, on a guy like Dave Martinez or something like that. I think that that's very interesting. And the expectations for them, are they through the roof? Are they more, okay, we're going to see how it goes type of thing? With Boston, they have to be through the roof. Otherwise, the fans will tell you.
Well, and I mean, the thing with Boston's that I know, Patrick, you mentioned it with Dave Martinez, where you're like, you know what? He's never really managed before. That question to me is more emphasized with Alex Cora, because at least with Dave Martinez, he's had experiences being the bench coach with Madden in Chicago, being the bench coach with Joe Madden in Tampa Bay, where Alex Cora, it's basically he was the bench coach this year, and I know the Astros went deep into the playoffs, won the World Series, but he is like true, I've been a bench coach for only 1 year, and now I'm jumping into the managerial game. Are you with me, Patrick? Do you kind of have a little bit more of that worry with an Alex Cora than you would with a Dave Martinez?
I definitely would say so. And I think especially with Cora, I think the big thing that helps him out in this regard, even though he has only been the bench coach, as you said, for a season, is that he's going into a situation in Boston with a mass media market and a rabid fan base. And actually has experience with that. You know, he was a Red Sox player. He played under Terry Francona. And Terry Francona later said that out of all the players he managed, he kind of picked out Cora and said, he's going to manage one day, which I think really speaks volumes for Cora. And I think definitely not managing before is going to hurt him, but I think he's going to rely early on being a great communicator and his understanding of the Red Sox and the city of Boston and that market. That's going to really help his cause for the first while. And I think he'll figure out the best way to manage as he goes on.
Well, and I mean, he's also coming to a team, like you said, the history and not only the media there, but this is also a team, Brandon, I'll kick it to you for this. This is also a team that, unless my research here is wrong, they haven't been to the playoffs since 2013. That was when they won the World Series.
Yeah, it's been a little dry for Boston lately, and it has been. I mean, they were a team that, and Ricky, you may have been on this train too. Mm-hmm. Boston was when they were going to the playoffs. Boston was kind of my favorite. I'm thinking, okay, the Boston Red Sox, they're going to be the team this year. And then when they made it, I was obviously delusional, not realizing that the Houston Astros were, God's creation this year. I really thought Boston was it, but they have, unfortunately, it seems like a ways to go. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could be wrong, and please tell me if I am. I'm all about that. But they felt like a team that was not ready for the next step to the ALCS or anywhere near a World Series this year. Their pitching has been good. Their hitting is very, very good at times, and other times non-existent. They are that team right now where I'm like, they're a good team, but they're nowhere near a great team.
Well, and I mean, I'll kick it to you, Patrick, for this. Do you think we're going to put all of that on John Farrell? Are we putting that all on him because he was basically fired as the manager?
I think you have to put a little bit on him because there were some incidents last season with the Red Sox, with like David Price,
yes,
and other players, with Dustin Pedroia as well, where there wasn't that great clubhouse culture that there used to be. And that was part of the reason that John Farrell was brought into the Red Sox in the first place. He was there to fix the damage that the Bobby Valentine year caused on the Red Sox.
Yeah.
And he did win a World Series with them, and he did something. And it was often pointed out that he won 2 straight division titles with the Red Sox, which apparently no one has done since 1915, which I think is crazy. But I think they even said to themselves that John Farrell is a very old-school disciplinarian guy, and they wanted to go to someone who was really, which is kind of all the rage in baseball right now, someone who is a little bit younger and who's a great communicator and can really bond with players. And I think especially another trait I didn't mention about Cora is that he's also bilingual, which can definitely help with a lot of the players on the team being having Latin heritage, which is going to be key for him.
Well, I mean, that's huge. I mean, I even think back to the World Series that never happened, and I say that jokingly for my friends here on the south side of Chicago with us, is when the White Sox had Ozzie Guillen. Like, they had a guy that was the bilingual guy that can speak to any type of player that is coming in, and especially with the kind of, I'm going to say, overall population of where baseball is, it's not like a basketball or a football. It's a sport that is dominated by Hispanic-speaking players.
Yeah, so that's very important to be able to have that today. I mean, there's obviously a number of translators, but when you have a manager that can be talking to your player, each player, just one-on-one with the player, that's a huge connection. And you don't have to go through that translator. That's a huge connection. And
then the last thing, we will switch over. Patrick, I'm going to hit you with this first like we've been doing for every single team. New York Yankees still do not have a manager. They parted ways with Joe Girardi after losing to the Astros. It's funny. Both teams that the Astros defeated on the AL side parted ways with their managers, both the Red Sox and the Yankees. If you are the New York Yankees, congratulations. You are now a Steinbrenner. Who are you kind of saying, I want that guy to be our manager? Go and get him.
Wow, that is that is really tough right now because I feel like a lot of the managers who I would have gone after if I was the Yankees are now taken up. Dave Martinez is off the market. Cora is off the market. There have been other guys who have been off. And the way that I'm looking at it now is that there's really no hot shot manager who I think is on the market right now that I would lure to the Yankees and have you say, okay, here's a bunch of young players. Here's the biggest media market in the country. We want you to take it and run with it. And if I'm the Yankees, and if I would probably go the way that I think that they're going, is they have to go in-house to somebody who knows this group of players already and knows how to handle the expectations of this market. And it kind of speaks to itself that the Yankees, since 1996, after being years of being a team where managers came and went, since 1996, they've only had two managers, Joe Torre and Joe Girardi, which kind of speaks about how rare this opening is nowadays, where it used to be, someone would come in every other year. So if I was the Yankees, I would probably go with maybe one of their bench coach or their first base coach, Rob Thompson or Tony Pena, and I would go to one of those guys that I know the players are going to embrace and one that already knows the expectations of what it's like to coach at the Yankees.
Well, Patrick, let me tell you, I absolutely hated the move for the Yankees to get rid of Joe Girardi. I couldn't stand it because the Yankees were not even supposed to be in the ALCS this year, yet we're in the ALCS this year. And for them to now get rid of Joe Girardi after him getting them there, helping to get them there. The players get themselves there, but the manager plays an integral role. I don't like the move. I don't like the move at all. I think Joe Girardi should still be at the helm of these New York Yankees right now. But since he is not, one of the guys who is, I've heard rumored for this job is Don Mattingly. Currently the Marlins manager. I actually think that a move like that, if it would ever happen, would be very good because he knows a big market. LA. He was out there. He handled them. Dodgers were good. I think that he could be a good fit because he would know how to handle the media. He would know how to handle, those fans who are expecting winning all the time. I think not that it'll happen, and it is just a rumor, but I think somebody like that could be a good fit for the New York Yankees.
That's a great point.
I'm going to hit you guys with one. I don't mean to cut you off, Patrick, but I'm glad Brandon didn't say this name because I don't think this is going to happen. I'm saying if I was in the front office, this is the first phone call I make. I'm just going to throw out the name, and I'll let either one of you two. I think Brandon will let you take it first, Patrick.
Please don't say Lou Piniella.
Alex Rodriguez. A-Rod. That's who I'm calling up. I'm calling up A-Rod, and I'm saying, hey, big boy, I want you to come out of the booth and be our manager. Work with these players. Teach them what you had on the field. Teach them your smarts that I see in the Fox broadcast every single playoff. Come be our manager, big guy.
Wow. They actually asked Cashman that today about whether they would consider bringing in Alex Rodriguez, and he kind of sidestepped it a little bit. So I think he's definitely under some kind of consideration, but I don't know if the Yankees are ready to throw their manager position and all their young talent to a guy who has never managed, never coached, who's been a broadcaster. And even though that's not too much against him, I just don't see the Yankees being comfortable enough with A-Rod, even though they've known him for a while and he could understand the market, throwing all of their young talent to him and saying, here you go, figure it out, and we expect championships. So I don't know if they're ready to go out and do that just yet.
I love where he is right now in terms of a broadcaster. He is a great broadcaster. I hated Alex Rodriguez as a player. He was a cocky SOB, and everyone knew it, and he knew it, and you either hated him for it or you loved him for it. But he is one hell of a broadcaster. He is so poised. He knows exactly what he's talking about. He totally gets it. he's a great broadcaster. I honestly think that he should continue with that line of work, to be honest with you. But, because he knows so much as a broadcaster, I think that he probably could be a good coach. But I like where he is right now. And quite honestly, he's got a pretty cushy job.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the name that, I mean, if I'm Cashman, if I'm the owner of the Yankees, that's what I'm thinking. Because, I mean, it's like Patrick said, all the guys I would realistically want are already taken. And the thing with Don Mattingly is, are we going to look at him and go, well, let's look at how he was with the Dodgers, not necessarily how he was with the Marlins, because the Marlins were nowhere near the caliber of team that he had with the Dodgers.
Ricky, my quick question for both of you, really, Patrick too, you're in on this as well, is do the Yankees want Alex Rodriguez to come back?
No.
Because it did not seem like it was the best end of a career in terms of him playing for the Yankees. It didn't seem like it was the smoothest thing. Like it seemed like he was trying so hard, Rodriguez was, to say, everything's good, blah blah blah. But it didn't. It seemed like they were like, you're done. Okay, you gotta go. We're kind of done with you. You need to move on. You've been great, but you've been a distraction at the same time. You gotta go. So it just didn't seem to me like it was the best. It's like you're smiling, but you're gritting your teeth while you're doing it and saying, this was great, everybody. Had a great time, That's how it felt like to me. So I almost think maybe he sidestepped that because he didn't want to talk about it because it's nowhere near going to happen.
My quick answer is no. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, I can't say that. I can't say that they would definitely bring him back. It was such an ugly kind of breakup that even though the time has passed, I still don't think that they're ready to, do something as drastic as offer him their managerial job.
And then one of the last things before we end this, Patrick, I know we only, in the pre-talk before this, we mentioned 3 teams. I want to throw a surprise one out to you.
Ricky does this all the time. He's all about surprises. He surprises me with things all the time. Like, Brandon, do you remember this stat from back in 1999? No, Ricky, I frickin' don't. But go ahead, Ricky, please, surprise us both.
So this is a manager kind of hiring that I just saw the type of job that he had before being hired, and it kind of, not a red flag, but it threw up a flag with me, and that's the Philadelphia Phillies hiring Dave Kapler, who was the Dodgers' director of player development. Does that throw a flag to you like it did to me that the Phillies went ahead and got a guy who was necessarily not managing last year?
It's probably more unusual, although I think the Astros or the Braves, one of those 2 teams, actually one of their GMs decided to make himself manager in the middle of the season. So although it's not something we haven't seen before, I just think that's pretty unusual, especially over the people that they interviewed. They interviewed John Farrell, I think. They interviewed a few of their coaches. They interviewed Chip Hale, the Athletics third base coach. So it is kind of a shock that they actually went with a director of player development, since that's just usually not the road they kind of take. But we'll have to see about Gabe Kapler. I don't think it's terrible right off the bat, but it's just unusual. You don't really see that happening.
The Phillies, I think, were interviewing fans one day. You want to be our manager? You want to be our manager? We'll take you.
Oh.
Well, yeah, they were looking for Dennis, Mack, and Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's who they were looking for to be their manager. But, Patrick, I want to thank you for calling in. Thank you yet again also for supporting us on our $10 Patreon tier. And before I wrap all this up for the beautiful people that were watching this, any final words you've got for the MVP guys or for everyone watching on YouTube?
I just say thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me come on and talk baseball with you guys. I know this is the primetime podcast, and you guys are mostly talking about college athletics, but I've heard you guys talk baseball in the past, and I consider it like, you know what, if I'm going to talk baseball with any guys, I would talk it with you guys. So thanks for letting me come on. And thanks for moving aside college athletics for a bit to let me talk baseball. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Like you said, we have talked some baseball in the past. Before Brandon had That's What I Think, the final thought, Swanee's final thought, would sometimes dive in to the baseball side. So, I mean, I saw it and I was like, you know what, Patrick, if that's what you want to talk about, that's what we're going to talk about. But you might be asking yourself at home, how do I become like Patrick? How do I hang out with you guys on the phone and talk about baseball for about a half hour? You go on to patreon.com/most valuable podcast. The $10 tier is how you do that. Be like Jake, be like Patrick, our tremendous patrons at patreon.com/most valuable podcast. Want to thank you guys for watching, but more importantly, want to thank Patrick for joining us today. He'll be back. Hopefully, he'll be back next month. I expect to see you back next month. I can't wait to talk to you in the month of December. But as always, everyone out there watching, have a good day, everybody.